There are people who pray every day, open their Bible every morning, sit in church every Sunday, and still go home feeling empty inside. They sing worship songs with everyone else while quietly wondering why their heart feels distant from God. They hear testimonies about peace, joy, and spiritual fire, yet inside they feel numb. And the hardest part is that many Christians are too afraid to admit it. They think struggling means they are failing God. They think emptiness means their faith is broken. So they smile in front of people while silently fighting exhaustion in private. But maybe the reason you feel empty is not because God abandoned you. Maybe it is because somewhere along the way you started treating Christianity like a performance instead of a relationship. You became focused on looking spiritually alive instead of truly being close to Him. And the more pressure you put on yourself to appear strong, the more exhausted your soul became. God never asked you to carry the weight of pretending. He never wanted your relationship with Him to become another burden on your shoulders. Sometimes the emptiness is not punishment. Sometimes it is a warning that your soul is starving for real intimacy with God. One of the greatest traps Christians fall into is believing that more activity automatically means more closeness to God. We fill our schedules with church events, Christian content, sermons, devotionals, and endless routines. But somehow our hearts still feel dry. That is because religion without intimacy becomes empty motion. You can know verses without knowing His presence. You can memorize Scripture while forgetting how to sit quietly before God. You can become so focused on doing things for Him that you stop spending time with Him. And slowly, faith turns into obligation. Prayer becomes rushed. Worship becomes routine. Even reading the Bible starts feeling mechanical instead of alive. But God never wanted your heart to become a machine. Christianity was never meant to be a checklist. Jesus did not die so people could simply look religious. He died to bring people into relationship with the Father. The enemy loves when Christians stay busy but spiritually disconnected because exhausted believers become easier to discourage. The truth is that God is not impressed by how perfect your routines look. He wants your real heart. He wants honesty. He wants the version of you that is tired, confused, struggling, and desperate. Sometimes the breakthrough begins the moment you stop performing and start being real with God again. One of the greatest traps Christians fall into is believing that more activity automatically means more closeness to God. We fill our schedules with church events, Christian content, sermons, devotionals, and endless routines, but somehow our hearts still feel dry. That is because religion without intimacy becomes empty motion. You can know verses without knowing His presence. You can memorize Scripture while forgetting how to sit quietly before God. You can become so focused on doing things for Him that you stop spending time with Him. And slowly, faith turns into obligation. Prayer becomes rushed. Worship becomes routine. Even reading the Bible starts feeling mechanical instead of alive. But God never wanted your heart to become a machine. Christianity was never meant to be a checklist. Jesus did not die so people could simply look religious. He died to bring people into relationship with the Father. The enemy loves when Christians stay busy but spiritually disconnected because exhausted believers become easier to discourage. The truth is that God is not impressed by how perfect your routines look. He wants your real heart. He wants honesty. He wants the version of you that is tired, confused, struggling, and desperate. Sometimes the breakthrough begins the moment you stop performing and start being real with God again. There are seasons where Christians pray desperately and hear nothing back. No signs, no answers, no emotional breakthrough, just silence. And during those moments, many believers start questioning everything. They wonder if God is disappointed in them. They wonder if they lost their faith. But silence does not always mean absence. Sometimes God is doing His deepest work in the quiet seasons. A seed underground looks forgotten before it ever breaks through the surface. In the same way, your spiritual life may be growing in ways you cannot yet see. The problem is that modern Christianity often teaches people to expect constant emotional highs, but faith is not built only on feelings. Real faith is trusting God even when emotions disappear. Anyone can worship during miracles, but trusting Him during silence changes your soul forever. Sometimes God removes distractions and emotional comfort because He wants you to seek Him for who He is, not just for how He makes you feel. Those empty seasons often reveal whether your relationship with God was built on emotion or trust. And strangely enough, some of the people closest to God in Scripture walked through long seasons of silence before experiencing breakthrough. Maybe your silence is not rejection. Maybe it is preparation. Social media has made it easier than ever for Christians to compare their spiritual lives with everyone else. You see people posting about miracles, powerful worship moments, perfect devotion routines, and dramatic testimonies. And slowly, comparison starts poisoning your heart. You begin feeling like your faith is weak because your journey looks quieter. You wonder why other people seem spiritually alive while you feel stuck. But comparison has always been one of the enemy's favorite weapons because it distracts you from your personal relationship with God. Your walk with Him was never supposed to look identical to someone else's. Some people grow through storms. Others grow through waiting. Some experience dramatic breakthroughs. Others experience slow transformation over years. God writes different stories for different people. The problem begins when Christians stop focusing on intimacy with God and start focusing on measuring themselves against others. Comparison steals peace because it convinces you that God is doing more for everyone else. But the truth is that many people who look spiritually strong online are fighting hidden battles too. God does not compare His children against each other. He calls each person to walk faithfully with Him. Your value does not decrease because your journey looks different. The turning point in many Christians' lives comes when they finally stop trying to impress God and simply surrender. Not polished prayers, not perfect routines, just honesty. There is something powerful that happens when a believer finally says, God, I cannot do this without you anymore. That kind of surrender breaks pride. It breaks self-reliance. It breaks the exhausting pressure to appear spiritually strong all the time. And suddenly, faith becomes real again. The emptiness begins to fade because your soul stops running on performance and starts resting in grace. This is what so many Christians miss for years. They think spiritual maturity means becoming emotionally untouchable, but true maturity often begins with dependence on God. Jesus never praised fake strength. He blessed the poor in spirit. He drew near to the brokenhearted. He responded to honesty. Some of the deepest encounters with God happen when people reach the end of themselves. Maybe your emptiness has been leading you toward surrender all along. Maybe God allowed your soul to feel dry so you would stop depending on routines, achievements, or appearances to feel spiritually alive. Sometimes losing the illusion of control is the very thing that finally brings you closer to God. One reason Jesus connected so deeply with broken people is because they were honest about their need for him. The Pharisees looked spiritually impressive on the outside, but their hearts were distant. Meanwhile, sinners, outcasts, and struggling people cried out honestly to God, and Jesus welcomed them. That truth still matters today. God is not searching for people who know how to look holy in front of crowds. He is searching for hearts that are open before him. You do not need to hide your fears during prayer. You do not need to pretend you understand everything. God already sees every hidden thought inside you. And surprisingly, honesty often becomes the doorway to intimacy. Some Christians stay spiritually empty because they only give God-edited versions of themselves. They pray carefully scripted prayers while hiding their real pain. But healing begins when masks fall apart. Imagine bringing your disappointment, confusion, anger, exhaustion, and weakness directly before God instead of pretending they do not exist. He is not intimidated by your struggles. He already carried the cross knowing every flaw you would ever have. The closer you become to God, the less energy you spend pretending. Real faith is not pretending to be strong. Real faith is trusting God enough to be honest. Many Christians feel empty because part of their heart is still searching for fulfillment in places that can never satisfy them. The world constantly promises happiness through success, attention, money, relationships, entertainment, or achievement. And for a while, those things can create temporary excitement. But eventually the feeling fades, and the emptiness returns stronger than before. That is because human souls were created for something eternal. No amount of worldly success can replace intimacy with God. People spend years chasing distractions while their spirit quietly starves underneath the surface. The scary part is that distractions do not always look sinful. Sometimes they simply keep you too busy to hear God clearly. Constant noise slowly disconnects people from their inner spiritual life. And when silence finally arrives, they realize how empty they actually feel inside. Jesus said that whoever drinks from the water of this world will thirst again, but whoever drinks from him will never truly thirst. That verse is deeper than many people realize. It means your soul was designed with a need that only God can fully satisfy. Nothing else will ever completely fill that space. Not achievements, not approval, not comfort. Only him. Sometimes the most life-changing spiritual moments do not happen in crowded churches or emotional conferences. Sometimes they happen quietly, early in the morning, late at night, alone with God. In a world filled with constant distraction, silence has become rare. But throughout Scripture, people encountered God deeply in quiet places. Moses on the mountain, Elijah hearing the still small voice, Jesus withdrawing alone to pray. Intimacy grows where distractions decrease. Yet many Christians never slow down enough to truly sit with God anymore. They consume endless content about faith without personally experiencing His presence. There is a difference between hearing about God and spending time with Him. Quiet time is not about religious obligation. It is about creating space for your soul to breathe again. It is where fear settles down. It is where identity becomes clear. It is where God gently reminds you who you are. The enemy wants people constantly distracted because distracted souls struggle to hear God clearly. But when you intentionally spend time with Him, Even in silence, something inside begins changing. Peace slowly replaces anxiety. Gratitude replaces bitterness. Hope replaces emptiness. And over time, you realize that God was never distant. The noise around you was simply louder than his voice. One of the biggest misunderstandings in modern Christianity is the belief that strong faith always feels emotional. But feelings constantly change. Some days you feel spiritually inspired. Other days you feel drained and disconnected. If your faith depends entirely on emotions, your relationship with God will always feel unstable. Mature faith learns how to trust God even when emotions fade. Think about relationships in life. Real love is not proven only during emotional highs. It is proven through commitment during difficult seasons too. In the same way, faith deepens when believers continue walking with God through uncertainty, pain, and silence. Some of the strongest Christians are not people constantly overwhelmed with emotion. They are people who remained faithful when life became hard. The enemy wants Christians to believe they are spiritually failing every time they do not feel inspired. But your emotions are not always accurate measurements of God's presence. Sometimes he is closest during the seasons that feel the darkest. The cross itself looked like defeat before resurrection came. So if you feel spiritually tired right now, do not assume God abandoned you. Keep praying. Keep trusting. Keep walking. Real faith often grows strongest in seasons where feelings alone are not enough to carry you. There are people listening right now who secretly believe they ruined their relationship with God. Maybe you drifted away. Maybe you fell into sin again. Maybe you stopped praying for months because guilt convinced you to stay distant. But one of the enemy's greatest lies is convincing people they are too far gone to return to God. The gospel says the opposite. Throughout Scripture, God constantly restored broken people who thought they failed beyond repair. Peter denied Jesus and was restored. David fell deeply into sin and still found mercy. The prodigal son walked away from his father and was welcomed home with open arms. God's mercy is bigger than your worst moment. And maybe the emptiness you feel is actually your soul longing to come back home. You do not have to clean yourself up before approaching God. You come to him broken, and he begins transforming you from the inside out. Christianity is not about never falling. It is about continually returning to the one who never stops loving you. God is not waiting to shame you. He is waiting for you to come closer again. His grace was always meant for struggling people. So many Christians spend years feeling empty because they believe Christianity is mainly about trying harder. But the truth that changes everything is this: the Christian life was never meant to be lived without deep dependence on God. You were never designed to carry your burdens alone. You were never meant to force yourself into peace through human effort. Real transformation happens when people stop striving for God's love and start living from it. The closer you grow to him, the more your soul begins changing naturally. Peace grows slowly. Wisdom grows slowly. Strength grows slowly. But it happens through relationship, not performance. The emptiness many believers feel is often the result of trying to replace intimacy with activity. And once that truth becomes clear, everything changes. Prayer stops feeling like obligation and starts feeling like connection. Worship becomes personal again. Scripture becomes alive again. Hope returns. Joy returns. Not because life suddenly becomes perfect, but because you finally realize that God Himself is the source your soul has been searching for all along. If this message reached your heart today, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who may need encouragement too. And remember this, God is closer than you think, even in the moments you feel the emptiest.